Hello, my name's Nat Hendry Torrance and I'm the Liberty Protection Safeguards Clinical Lead for NHS England in the North West. This video is part of a series on the Liberty Protection Safeguards for different audiences. At the time of recording, October 2022, we don't yet have the announcement of when the Liberty Protection Safeguards will start, but we do know that they're going to replace the Deprivation of Liberty Safeguards or DOLS. In this video, we'll be talking about the Mental Capacity Act and the Liberty Protection Safeguards. This video aims to share some key points and consider the impact of the Liberty Protection Safeguards for health services for 16 and 17-year-olds. Let me introduce you to some experts.
Hiya, I'm Emma Powell and I'm the Regional Nurse Advisor for Young People's Healthcare Transition in the North of England.
Hi everyone, I'm Khalil Khan and I'm the Head of Safeguarding Adults for Bolton Place Base. I lead on Liberty Protection Safeguards on behalf of the Greater Manchester Integrated Care Board.
Hello, I'm Alison Steele and I'm a consultant paediatrician who's worked in the North East of England and in London, and I'm currently the Officer for Child Protection for the Royal College of Paediatrics and Child Health.
We know how important working within the legal framework of the Mental Capacity Act is, and it has always applied to 16 and 17-year-olds. But there are some changes that we need to talk about now because we're approaching the implementation of the Liberty Protection Safeguards. One of the hot topics for health services for 16 and 17-year-olds is the workforce confidence and competence in applying the Mental Capacity Act. Does Mental Capacity Act training already take place in services for 16 and 17-year-olds?
That's a really interesting question. Yes, it does. Training and skilling our workforce to be confident and competent in working with the Mental Capacity Act is crucial. All NHS services have options to undertake e-learning for health modules on the website and have trust-specific local training offers, including face-to-face training in some areas of work.
Mental Capacity Act training is recommended for all NHS and health staff. All teams should be trained in Mental Capacity Act at the level appropriate for their role. More information about this can be found in the intercollegiate documents for safeguarding adults and children and in the guidance from our professional bodies. All health providers are required to have staff trained and competent in using the Mental Capacity Act. How your individual organisation does this might vary. However, it is acknowledged that being confident in using the Mental Capacity Act comes with the experience of using it.
We know that we will also need Liberty Protection Safeguards specific training for our staff. The training strategy that is being developed centrally for LPS categorises staffs into groups depending upon their role within the Liberty Protection Safeguards process. Training packages are being developed for all groups of staff and will be rolled out nearer to the implementation date.
Is applying the Mental Capacity Act in children's health services different to other settings? What does the Mental Capacity Act look like in children's health services?
No, Nat, it's exactly the same. There are some nuances with the relationship between the Mental Capacity Act and other legislation that applies to children, and we must remember that not being a parent or having parent responsibility for a 16 or 17-year-old does not mean that you can't make a decision on their behalf if they are deemed to lack mental capacity. It begins with assessing mental capacity.
Furthermore, in children's healthcare services, like in other services, we need to consider a person's ability to make decisions for themselves. We follow the two-stage Mental Capacity Act test. So, for example, if we have established a lack of mental capacity, we would move into the best interest process and consider whether any of the options could amount to a deprivation of liberty. Furthermore, during the best interest process, we would consider the views, wishes and feelings of the young person, family members, professionals and advocates if they are involved.
As with all services, we do have the option of applying to the Court of Protection, and the types of scenarios we might face when applying to the Court of Protection could be around serious medical treatment where the young person faces a high risk of complications or restraints may be required. There may be a dispute between clinicians or those interested and involved in the young person's care.
The Liberty Protection Safeguards arrangements talk about responsible bodies. Who is a responsible body for 16 and 17-year-olds, and how does this impact on children's health services?
Again, this is a really interesting question, but this is a complex area for all children's services, including the NHS, local authority and education. We know that the Integrated Care Board, ICB, is the responsible body for people who are continuing healthcare funded. NHS continuing healthcare eligibility starts at the age of 18 years old and above. So for 16 and a 17-year-old, it is likely to be the local authority and who are the responsible body or the NHS trust if the young person is mainly in hospital. Moreover, integrated care boards and local authorities will need to work closely together to identify young people in transition who may become continuing healthcare eligible on their 18th birthday and have arrangements in place to transfer to the Liberty Protection Safeguards scheme and the responsible body function.
As Khalil said, NHS Trust could also be the responsible body for a 16 or 17-year-old if they are mainly in a hospital setting and will need to have systems and processes in place to undertake the whole LPS process for a 16 or 17-year-old in its care. This might apply if a young person was in hospital for their physical health and their mental health.
Children's health services will likely be involved in Liberty Protection Safeguards assessments for 16 and 17-year-olds, even if they're not the responsible body. This is because they may have the specialist skills and knowledge needed to undertake parts of the Liberty Protection Safeguard processes.
So at what stage could a children's health service practitioner need to consider putting an LPS into place for a young person?
Thank you, Nat, for raising that question. It's quite interesting. To do this, we need to trigger the LPS, Liberty Protection Safeguard process, which needs to be further clarified. So for now, keep in mind the triggers for the deprivation of Liberty Safeguards, and there's 3 things that you need to consider. Number 1, does the young person lack capacity to make decisions regarding their care and treatment? Or number 2, are they unable to leave, or would we stop them from leaving? Or do they have to ask permission to leave? And number 3, are they under constant supervision and control? Do you know where they are at all times?
For the majority of 16 and 17-year-olds who may lack the mental capacity to make their own decisions, they will already be involved with services who provide support to them, including education, such as health services and transition services, in both the NHS and local authority.
It is important that the workforce understands the Mental Capacity Act and how it relates to young people. And as we approach the implementation of Liberty Protection Safeguards, we need to support the workforce to understand when Liberty Protection Safeguards need to be triggered. Services will need to work together and build on the strong relationships that they already have.
What do we need to consider around 16 and 17-year-olds and the Liberty Protection Safeguards for health services for children?
Liberty Protection Safeguards will apply to 16 and 17-year-olds where the current deprivation of Liberty Safeguards scheme does not. This is a whole system change.
Further to this, organisations who provide services to children will need to work together to identify young people who are in the scope of the Mental Capacity Act and the Liberty Protection Safeguards. This could be done during the transition process that already exists in services and at place base. Liberty Protection Safeguards has been designed to work alongside assessment and care planning processes that we already have in place.
Our workforce who currently work with 16 and 17-year-olds who have complex needs are highly skilled, and we need to support them to develop further skills around Mental Capacity Act practice and Liberty Protection Safeguards. We need the right types of training. Applying the Mental Capacity Act is complex and can be challenging.
What about the places where 16 and 17-year-olds live?
Again, this is a really interesting question. We do know that the Liberty Protection Safeguards will apply in more settings than the current DOL scheme. And this will include people's own home, residential educational settings, supported living arrangements, as well as hospitals, care and nursing homes, basically anywhere that a person receives care and treatment really.
Children's services will need to work with young people themselves and with their families and carers to provide information and support as they go through the Mental Capacity Act and Liberty Protection Safeguards processes.
Children's health services may not have had much exposure to the current DOLS system or had much interface with the Mental Capacity Act, and therefore may not have developed processes such as those that we see in services mainly delivered to adults. That's an area that we can work on now, and we can share good practice with our colleagues in other services.
What can we do next?
So there's a number of things we can do. So firstly, you can find out who your Mental Capacity Act lead is within your organisation, speak to them and find out what's happening in your area of work.
What we do know is that whilst we are waiting for the final details of the Liberty Protection Safeguards to be confirmed, the Mental Capacity Act, which underpins everything, should be your main focus and is not significantly changing.
We can upskill our workforce. We can raise the profile of the Mental Capacity Act and start to introduce the principles of the Liberty Protection Safeguards as we understand them.
And to keep up to date with what is happening with this agenda, it is important for the Mental Capacity Act leads in your organisation or at place base can consider getting involved in your local Mental Capacity Act and Liberty Protection Safeguard forums that you already have in place, that in operation.
You can keep an eye out for the publication of the final statutory guide.
Do Children's Health Services already consult with young people and their families and advocates as part of the work that they already do?
Yes, it's a crucial part of working with young people, especially as they prepare to transition to adult services. There is an opportunity for services to be proactive around LPS in the early stages of planning for a young person's transition. As responsible bodies, we can walk alongside them. We know how important good communication is and can really help prepare young people and their families.
Thank you, Alison, Emma and Khalil. There really is a lot to consider, and we do hope that Children's Health Services are able to get involved with their local Mental Capacity Act and Liberty Protection Safeguards steering groups.